D Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you, David James as well. Derek Mason toughing it out. He was sick as a dog yesterday. Hopefully he's as sick as a less sick dog today. We did have a texter yesterday, Derek, right off the hop, say, Derek sounds so sick, it's making me sick.
Well, I don't think my voice got no better, but I'm feeling a little better. But I didn't want to contaminate you fellas over there, so I figure I'll stay out another day and proceed with caution, because you got a little child, and I don't want to be blamed for getting him sick. So
the number of germs that kid has brought home from preschool to me. I mean, somebody should give him an illness, see how he feels about it. I'm kidding, of course. He has made me very sick. But Derek, you have the heart of a champion. That is why you power through even when you aren't feeling well. So I do want to start on something a bit lighthearted today. I've mentioned this on the program a couple of times, but I have an incredibly difficult time watching other people embarrass themselves. It's secondhand embarrassment. So when I'm watching a movie or a television show and a character is in a really awkward situation and it's embarrassing for them, like I get the shakes. Like it's so cringeworthy. It makes me physically uncomfortable to watch other people embarrass themselves. Which brings me to Liam Cohen. Liam Cohen was introduced yesterday as the new head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And all of you know, what do Jaguars fans like to chant?
Duval.
Exactly. They say Duval.
Why?
Because that's the county Jacksonville is in.
Oh, that's the county.
Duval County. I didn't know that. I
Willie learned something today.
Wow, Willie,
I'm a Floridian
too. Hold on. That's what I was about to say. You're a Floridian. You didn't know that?
I'm going to. You are no longer a Florida man, my friend.
Exactly.
We are
removed.
Florida man card.
I've been removed for a long time, but
yes.
I didn't know that.
Now you know, and knowing is half the battle.
Do they have enough fans that people hear them?
Thank you.
Do they have enough fans that they hear them when they chant?
If you listen to Jacksonville Jaguars games when there are people in the stadium, you can hear the Duval. You can hear that.
That one game over the last couple years.
I don't know when this started. Derek, did they do that when you played? Did they do that when you played?
I think they did.
And the Jaguars were good back then. The Jaguars were good.
Are the tarps able to yell Duval when they put the tarps over the upper deck?
Willie, stop.
I'm sorry. I'm hating on this guy.
Willie woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning.
Absolutely. Your Vanderbilt Commodores are doing great, and you wake up on the wrong side of the bed. Come on,
cranky Willie this morning. Anyway, I want you all to experience what I experienced. I want you to listen to Liam Cohen at the end of his introductory news conference. David, I'm going to have you play this a couple of times for the added effect. Play the clip.
Jacksonville, the community. Duval.
That just play it again.
David,
play it again.
Play it again.
Jacksonville, the community. Duval.
Oh, I hate it. Let me tell you one thing. If you have time, if you're not driving, you're at your desk, you don't want to do some work, pull up Twitter and just type in Liam Cohen into the search box, because this is the first thing that's going to come up. And I want you to look at his face after he says it. He looks like he practiced it in the mirror for hours, and he thought to himself afterwards, nailed it. He feels he's clearly so proud of himself. It's bad. It's bad.
There's a new commercial that Matthew McConaughey has out where he's trying to imitate the Bears, and he's saying it about 100 times. And then he finally gets it with the whole costume on. He finally gets it. He put on the glasses and he says, the Bears again, and walked away. But he nailed it. Matthew McConaughey nailed it.
Well, he's a professional actor. Of course he's going to nail it.
Listen to Liam Cohen. it was like he had this inner battle with himself as he was up there. Should I say it? Should I not say it? And then that little thing on the side of him, the mean one said, say it and say it like this. And it just came out.
David,
I
one more
think he's
time. Just
going-
one more time.
He's
Jacksonville, the community. Duval.
Oh, I hate it. I hope.
Why
you
do you
hear
keep
his
calling
voice
for it? Then you
change?
keep telling me to play it again.
I don't
You
know.
must love
No.
pain.
I want
Adam
everybody.
just loves pain.
He's just
David,
torturing
David.
I
himself
want
now.
everybody to
David.
feel my pain. I want no more. We're
Hey,
done.
David.
No more.
keep keep that as a drop because we are going to use it from here on. That will be a drop periodically throughout the week. Okay.
Duval.
Oh, it's bad. It's bad. I hope the Jaguars go 0-17 for that reason alone. That
Anytime we want to throw Adam off, we're gonna throw that up there. Okay.
Oh.
Do we have like a clip of the crowd doing it? I just want to hear like at its best.
we'll find one. David will
I just
find
want to hear
one
what
for
it's
us.
supposed to sound like.
Oh man.
Oh man, it's bad. Someone said, "Who's ever running the 1025 Twitter page today? Cringeworthy is a great word to describe the Liam Cohen Duval. Cringe.
You're welcome.
Yes, it's. Oh man, it's bad. It's really bad. But I saw that yesterday, and like Willie said, it was almost like, you're rubbernecking on the highway. You don't want to look, but you just can't stop looking, despite the fact that you probably shouldn't be looking. But I do hope the Jaguars go 0-17 next season for that reason alone. So I know that it's mock draft season, and I've been reading a lot of mock drafts lately, obviously. And, I've noticed a lot that have had Cam Ward going to the Tennessee Titans with the number 1 overall pick. I saw one this morning that had Abdul Carter being drafted by the Titans at number 1 overall. That quote that Chad Brinker had last week about generational, that has certainly made the rounds. And Abdul Carter, and what your definition of generational is, and whether Abdul Carter is generational, Travis Hunter is generational. That's neither here nor there. But I saw a mock draft that I found to be very interesting by Nick Suss of the Tennessean, because he has the Tennessee Titans making 2 trades in the first round. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this, gentlemen, as well as our listeners as I read it, on what you would think if this is what the Titans decided to do in the first round of the NFL draft. So Nick Suss at the Tennessean has the Titans trading the number 1 pick to the Las Vegas Raiders, who have the 6th pick in the first round. And there are other picks that are accumulated in this deal as well. So Nick Suss has the Titans trading down from 1 to 6. And then he has them trading back again with the Bengals from 6 to 17. So he has 2 trades, 1 to 6 with the Raiders and 6 to 17 with the Bengals. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. He has the Titans selecting Michael Williams, the edge rusher out of Georgia, with the number 1 pick. With their number 1 pick, the 17th overall pick in the NFL draft. And of course, he accumulates a lot of picks through this mock trade. Nick Suss does. But here's what I thought was interesting. He does take a quarterback in the 4th round. He takes Will Howard out of Ohio State in the 4th round. Now, this could mean that the Titans sign a veteran quarterback and Will Howard becomes the backup, and Will Howard learns behind whichever veteran quarterback you so choose. But he has them taking Will Howard in the 4th round. So what do you guys think of the idea of the Titans trading twice in the first round, back from 1 to 6, and then again from 6 to 17 to accumulate a ton of draft capital, and then use a 4th round pick to draft Will Howard out of Ohio State?
Let me start at D-Mace because
Go ahead.
in 2016, John Robinson did trade twice. I don't really like going all the way to 17, but I do like the idea. Now, I don't know if Nick gets into what you would get.
He does.
Because to me, that's an important part of the question. But
I can tell you what they get for trading with the Raiders.
Because let me tell you what I do like about it.
Okay. Do you want me to tell you what
it signals?
Okay.
Tell me in a second. But to me, it signals that 2025 is a rebuild. And I am 100% on board with that. I think that is the approach that you should take. Whether you want to name it a rebuild or not, it's a rebuild. And in that, if you are going to say the reason we're doing this is in 2025, we might take some lumps, but in 2026, we're going to have an arsenal of picks. I'm on board with that. I don't know how many people would be. I am. So tell me what I get for trading down that low.
So according to Nick Suss,
you should get a boatload.
The Raiders, so the Titans trade the number 1 pick to the Raiders, who have the 6th pick. The Raiders give the Titans the 6th pick in the first round, the 73rd pick in the 3rd round, the 106th pick in the 4th round, and first-round picks in 2026 and 2027.
I like that. I
like that
a lot.
Then
by going to 27, by 17.
Yes. Then by 17.
That's just by going from 1 to 6.
That's just 1 to 6, according to Nick Suss. That's his projected trade. They then take the 6th pick, Derek, to trade back to 17. So they get that 17th pick, the 117th pick in the 4th round, and 1st and 3rd round picks in 2026. With 2 trades, writes Nick Suss, the Titans have picked up 3 extra 1st round picks, 2 extra 3rd round picks, and an extra early 4th round pick. Then they take Will Howard in the 4th round as their quarterback.
I like the concept. I don't, this is a mock draft, so it's not going to be exact here. I would be on board with the concept of getting 2 to 3 extra 1st round picks. I might just be satisfied with going from 1 to 6 and getting a guy that I really think could be really good at 6 and taking just what the Raiders gave me and not bothering to go to 17. But these are the things that they may have the possibility of doing that, to me, far outweigh taking the flyer. I shouldn't say a flyer, but taking the shot at the quarterback with the 1st pick. I think that is a way, way better option. That's my.
What do you think, Derek?
Listen, I mean, it all sounds great. If this was an actual trade that was in process, and I knew beforehand this is what they would be offering, and this is what I would ultimately get, and I would say yes to it, because you're getting multiple 1st round draft picks. But you got to understand this too. Okay, if you're going to do all that, then your owner has to stay true to form. And what I mean by that is, if she agreed to be patient, she has to allow this team to be patient, because they have all these draft picks, but they still don't have a quarterback. And you're talking about trying to draft a quarterback in the 4th round, Will Howard. I mean, you might as well keep Will Levis. If that's the case, and try to allow him to develop as a quarterback, all the while getting your bridge quarterback. So if they are going to make this move, then the owner has to be patient with everyone. She has to, because if she's not going to practice patience in an instance like this, then she's going to bring another regime in, and their concept and the way they're running things may be totally different from what Brinker and his staff wants to do. So she, first and foremost, she has to be patient and willing to possibly, have some bad seasons in the midst of rebuilding. But that message that needs to be put out when you do this, it always, just like Willie have said, it always should be moving forward, rebuild. So you give the fans no sense of, okay, we're trying to go for the Super Bowl the next following year. No, we're rebuilding, and we're trying to get better each and every year as a team. Our goal is to be better than what we were in the previous season. Yes. Do we want to go to the Super Bowl? But we know realistically, because of the our roster being depleted, it was going to take us some time to get there. So if she does this, or if they do this, then to me, she has to be patient.
I think that is a key. She has to make sure that she knows up front that this is a long view, but this is how you build a championship roster. Why did the Herschel Walker trade work so well? Why do we always reference it? Is because Dallas got a big haul of picks, and they made the most of those picks. So to me, this is what I would do. There was a study that was done, and I can't remember who did it. We brought it up this summer, and we had a big discussion about it. And it was a study done, I think it was from some school of business or school of, I can't remember. I got to go find it. I think it was on The Athletic. but it had to do with a study of the last 20 or 30 NFL drafts. And we can try to find this. I think it was on The Athletic. But the principal findings of this study was that your percentages of hitting are way better with more picks. The teams that trade down and get more picks are the ones that succeed. Trading up to get picks is a bad way to go. And this is what it doesn't mean it will work every time, but your percentages are way better by trading down and getting more picks. That was the principal thing, and that stuck with me a lot. And so I go back to 2016, the Titans. Yes, Derek makes a great point from yesterday that they already had a couple of big pieces in place that made it a little easier to do that. It might sting a little bit because everybody will be squawking and saying, why didn't you take the quarterback? You need the quarterback. But this puts you in a position to get the quarterback and still, I think, address the needs of the roster over the next few years. And I do think it will take at least 2 or 3 years to build the roster the way you want it to.
Well, if you move down to, listen, if you move from 1 to 6, 6 to 17, and you're taking Will Howard in the third, fourth round, I think you're still going to be in a situation where, you don't have a quarterback because,
right.
You figure Will Howard will have to develop if indeed you do take him in the third or fourth round. My thing is, they have to draft guys that can be impact players or contributors right away. Brinkert said that we need to bring in the guys that can contribute. These young guys can contribute right away to our success, because if not, we're going to steadily be jumping in that free agent pool and overpaying for guys just to get us where we need to be. These rookies got to come in and they got to be a part of us winning, whether it be on special teams, the backup on, the inside backer, a fourth wide receiver, or even sometimes a backup quarterback. You got to be able to come in and contribute, and that helps expedite sort of the process that we got to go through.
You know what else you need? A messenger that could talk to the fans, talk to the media, and say, this is our plan. Work with us. Be patient with us. This is what we've chosen to do, and here's the reason why. Because if you don't, then you're going to fall victim to what happened this past year, where people, I think, had inflated expectations of what was really realistic, or at least possible, right? You should have known it was possible that Will Levis wasn't going to hit, and that free agency spending is usually not a great recipe for a bounce back year. It's usually not. It might. It was what they tried to do, but I think they gave a little bit too much of an expectation. I think if they go this route, and again, trading down to 17 would be a long way to go down. I would try to, in a perfect world, not go down that far for my first pick, but I like the concept of let's take 2 or 3 years. Let's amass a lot of draft capital because they don't have a lot. And that is how you're going to get your team in a better position. Free agency spending is not going to fix this roster.
Adam in Portland is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Adam, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Willie, what you're almost saying is if they could say, by the time we get in our new stadium, we're going to be playing winning football. That's exactly what I think, too, dude. I would take way less than what the Raiders would be offering from 1 to 6. Like, I think that's a hell of a deal. If you have a chance to get that, dude, you got to sign up for that immediately. What I'm hearing, though, when I hear Will Howard, and I'm just curious, I mean, this is a different conversation, I guess. Why is Quinn Ewers, not even mentioned? Where's he even supposed to fall? Is he just like a horrible draft prospect? Because I think he's better than Will Howard. I think he's better than some of the top quarterbacks in this draft. But people don't talk about it. But if we could somehow land Quinn Ewers and have a quarterback that was supposed to be good last year, and then be able to still get a haul like that, I would sign up for that all day, dude.
Thanks for the call, Adam. So on Mel Kiper's big board, his latest big board, he ranks each position. Shedeur Sanders 1, Cam Ward 2, Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss 3, Jalen Milroe out of Alabama 4, Kyle McCord out of Syracuse 5, Will Howard 6, Quinn Ewers 7, Dylan Gabriel 8, Curtis Rourke out of Indiana 9, and Tyler Shaw from Louisville at 10. So Will Howard and Quinn Ewers, according to Mel Kiper, pretty comparable. But here's my question, Derek. You mentioned that if the Titans are going rebuild, if they are clearly going for a rebuild, and would consider, as Nick Suss did in his mock draft, drafting Will Howard in the 4th round, you might as well keep Will Levis. But we know that regardless of the situation, Will Levis is not going to be a factor on this team next season, whether he's even on the roster or he's the clear backup or the 3rd string. He is not. We all expect him not to be a factor on this team next season. So, like, who is the quarterback that would signal to fans this is a rebuild? Because you don't sign Sam Darnold if you're trying to rebuild. You probably don't even sign Russell Wilson, I think, if you're trying to rebuild, or sign Aaron Rodgers if he becomes available. So who is the starting quarterback on a team that is clearly rebuilding?
It would be, to me, just because if you're gonna draft Will Howard in the 4th round, I get it if there was no quarterback on the roster. I mean, no quarterback under contract. I could see you adding a Will Howard and then going out and trying to figure it out via free agency. But in this situation, Will Levis isn't costing you any money. He's really not. And you got another year to try to develop him under a system. You may not see him as your franchise quarterback, but you can see him like Mike Vrabel saw Marcus Mariota. He's a guy that can, as we start to build around him, we can win some games with him, but we ultimately we're going to need someone else. Regardless of what Will Levis has done, I think moving on from him this quick, I understand that we've seen a lot, but even moving on from him this quick, I think would be a mistake. Again, it doesn't cost you much of anything. You don't have another quarterback on the roster. I think
Mason Rudolph is a free agent.
He's a free agent. So you got one quarterback on the roster that has playing time in the NFL. Why not keep him? And if you're able to move down to 17, what if one of those quarterbacks are still there? Whether it's Shedeur, whether it's Cam, whether it's Jackson
that's a
Dart,
great point.
What if that quarterback is there? You can draft a quarterback at 17 and still have your picks that you get from moving from 1 to 6 and then 6 to 17.
I believe in that wholeheartedly. I think that is a great point.
By the way, the only upcoming free agents who started multiple games this season: Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Andy Dalton, Mason Rudolph, Jacoby Brissett, and Cooper Rush. The only free agent quarterbacks who started multiple games this season. So after Darnold, it is not
Mac
a
Jones,
good list.
Did you say?
Actually, probably Mac Jones, not Daniel Jones. I'm sorry. It just says Jones, so I can't in the story. So it may
be Daniel Jones is not a free agent?
I don't know.
I assume he will be because the Vikings.
Yeah,
unless they keep him around to be the backup for McCarthy. That could be logical. They keep him around as a cheap backup.
It could be both Joneses. I'm trying to keep up with the Joneses there. Either way,
I see the reference there.
Either way, the quality of free agent quarterbacks with starting experience this season over multiple games, it is a thin group.
That's why Darnold is going to get overpaid. And that's why you want to stay as far away from that as you can. And you may not be able, this is the reality. You may not be able to solve the quarterback issue this year, and that's okay.
Speaking of quarterbacks,
Adam makes a good point about this is part of what you can sell with your messaging. Our goal is to build, as we move into the new stadium, our roster being in a much better position to win. But it can't happen this year. It's just not going to happen. Let's be real.
Speaking of quarterbacks, Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst, will join us next. We'll get into all of this with him. 615-737-1025. We'll also take your calls and your texts on our phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game.
Okay, let's talk Loan Pronto. If you're a homeowner and you're in need of some cash, Loan Pronto has a very efficient program that can get you that cash in a hurry to address what your project might be. It might be a home improvement project that you've been planning on for a long time, and you're saying, I want to make my house more valuable. I want that patio, or I want that basement man cave with the TVs and everything, or I need to upgrade a bedroom or a kitchen. Any of those things you need some cash for, and Loan Pronto can get you that money for the home improvement project in less than a week, because they have the technology in quickly converting the home equity into cold hard cash so you can get that money to you quick. So what they do is they just ask you to give them a phone call, 615-499-5780. That's 615-499-5780. Or you can go to loanpronto.com to get the details. Get approved in as little as 1 day with no hard credit pull up front. So get on it. Loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 1661781, subject to lender approval. NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063. The game, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you, joined on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, by Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst. Tim, I saw a quote yesterday from Jim Nagy, the director of the Senior Bowl, that caught my eye. He was discussing the historic nature of the 2024 quarterback class compared to the quarterback class in this upcoming draft. And Nagy said, quote, "It's certainly not last year. I don't know if any of these guys would be in the top 6 last year." I know that you are starting your NFL draft analysis, but the question remains, especially in the situation that the Titans find themselves in. Even if the quarterback class is not as stout as it was last year, teams still need quarterbacks, including the Titans. So as a team, how do you manage that, knowing that you might need a quarterback? You have the opportunity to get a quarterback, but you also may know that the quarterbacks at the top of this draft don't compare to the quarterbacks at the top of the draft class last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, look, I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. Like you can't go back in time, right? And this happens a lot where you go, well, if this guy was in this year's draft class, he would be at the top of it. It's like, well, it's great, but like he's not, and you can't get those guys anymore. Now, we've talked a little bit about the fact that like J.J. McCarthy, like maybe you can't, so, I do think it's typically not a fruitful conversation, at least legitimate one, because there's usually nothing you can do about it. I think this year is slightly different because of the unique situation that Minnesota finds themselves in. So I think I would kind of start there, but then I would also probably just say push back a little bit on it from a standpoint of this. And I think probably most of your listeners just, probably SEC fans and would be aware of this. This time last year, did everybody think Bo Nix was going to be an amazing prospect? Like what would Titans fans have thought had the Titans drafted Bo Nix? Like they probably wouldn't have been real pumped about it. And Bo Nix had a really good rookie season and, ends up, leading his team to a playoff appearance. Look, I think that if you were to go down through it, I haven't fully done it yet, but I think there's a pretty good shot that Cam Ward would come out, being liked by other people more than people like Bo Nix. It wouldn't surprise me if people feel a similar way about Will Howard. So, look, I do think there are going to be guys that as we sit here right now and we talk about, okay, now that we know how this past year's draft class fared in their rookie season and, how confident people feel about the guys coming out, that they'll say it now, but, I don't know that it's definitely going to, pan out that exact way.
We were discussing a mock draft by Nick Suss, who reports on the Titans for the Tennessean. He had the Titans trading back twice in the first round and ultimately drafting Will Howard as their quarterback of the future, potentially, in the 4th round. And again, I know you're early in your NFL draft analysis. We expect Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward in some order to go off the board first and second among quarterbacks. Based on your very early read, who would you have as number 3 on your big board in terms of available quarterbacks in this draft?
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, these are the guys, if I can do it this way, these are the guys that I would put in the mix for it. Will Howard would be in the mix. I think Quinn Ewers would be in the mix, and I think Kyle McCord would be in the mix. That's just in terms of the skill set of what I think that people typically, end up looking for, in terms of, size, athleticism, traits, things of that nature. So I forget the kid's name now, the kid that played at Indiana, I think that'll be an interesting name. No, the kid that's there this year,
Rourke
from James.
Rourke.
Yeah. So but I do think there are going to be other guys, for example, Riley Leonard, who, when he was at Duke, and then there was talk about him, where is he going to end up? Is he going to end up in Notre Dame? Is he going to end up at Oregon? I don't think he will, end up, being in the mix up there. I just think, deficiencies as a passer will, kind of keep him, in that next tier that's after that.
You didn't mention Jalen Milroe in that group. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, and if I can, I mean, just look, now I'm spacing on the kid's name in New England right now. Not Drake May, the other kid who was
Milton?
there. Yeah,
Joe
so
Milton. Yeah.
So I think that what Milton did in the preseason, and then what he did at the end of the year, I think actually helps Milroe. But I think that Milroe, similar thing, is going to be viewed as. I think there are some of these guys that if you were going to do a QB competition in t-shirt and shorts, then I think Milroe's in the mix, man. No question about it. And I think in some ways, Riley Leonard would be in the mix too. But I also think when you look around at some of the other guys, in terms of a physical component to it, but then it's also okay, what did you put on tape that I think will be different? I think that's where, there'll be separation from someone like Milroe. Whereas you take somebody like Cam Ward, his tape is awesome. He's got really good film from multiple places, much like Jane Daniels had good film from multiple places. And I think there'll be outlying characteristics with somebody like Cam Ward from the standpoint of he's got a natural calm in the pocket that is different than other guys. Whereas, other people kind of a little more frantic in the pocket. But I also think you're going to see someone like Kyle McCord, another guy who's had success multiple places. And people say okay, we like the traits, we like the physical ability. And oh, by the way, look, you've been good at more than one spot, which, I think starts to end up being, a nice evaluation piece.
Tim Hasselbeck is with us. Tim, I want to go back to Will Howard for just a moment because a lot of us got a chance to watch him front and center. And so I want to get your keen eye on something, because when I watch Ohio State, I'm reminded of loaded college teams that have won big with an A.J. McCarron or even a Matt Leinart, who was a high first-round pick. But the common thread is gifted player. Mac Jones might be an example too. Gifted
Great
players
example.
all around him. Really good scheme. I thought there were a lot of throws that Will Howard made. They were on the money, but the guy was open. There was a lot of separation because there was so much talent spread across the field. How do you try to factor that in when you evaluate him?
I think that's one of the hardest things in evaluating, because you're exactly right. Now, I think that, just for a little context on Will Howard, and I've seen him both in person and, on just watching film of him. He is gigantic. He's probably, 6'4", 6'5", about 235, maybe 240 pounds. He is huge. So I think there's also some of those elements too. When I say it, I'm yep, a little bit like Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord is a big guy, a really big guy. So I think that you're right. Look, I was very critical of Mac Jones because coming out, because I was well, that's great. You throw a bubble screen against Notre Dame that goes for 62 yards. That doesn't happen in the NFL. So I do think it's something that you have to pay attention to. Now, I do think playing in some big moments that's a nice evaluation piece when you're talking about a guy playing in a national championship game, or playing in a Rose Bowl, or doing things like that. That does matter, especially if you're then comparing him to somebody that was Kyle McCord, who played at Syracuse, and it was there was 27,000 people at your game against Duke. What is that environment like? So I think there are a bunch of factors that you have to pay attention to, in the evaluation process. But I do think the supporting cast and who you're playing against, I think, is one of the biggest hurdles in the evaluation process to get over. So now what I would say I like about Will Howard is, when the guy was open, he made the throw. He didn't dirt balls that he should have hit. I think there was a degree of difficulty on a lot of his throws. I think there was a complexity to their offense that was good. That makes me feel like he can do a lot. I also think that if you're going to go through what he went through at Kansas State and then go to Ohio State, make sure that you keep the job, win the job, keep the job, be criticized the way you were, and fight your way through it. Like, I think you're kind of made of the right stuff.
That's a great point. Tim, one more for me, and then I'll throw it to D-Mace. I'm curious about it was such a classic game that we saw, just like we hoped it would be, the Bills and the Chiefs. And there's a critical play, of course, that I'm sure in Buffalo they're still sore about, and that was the 4th and 1, where, it's just on the heels of them. There were so many quarterback sneaks in that game. It was a really interesting thing to watch throughout the game. But the one that they didn't get the break on, where one judge comes in and it looks like he's got the spot well past the marker. The other guy comes in, has got it short. They review it. See, I was reading today, CBS had 80 cameras on hand for that. I was disappointed that there wasn't a better look that we could see there. So where do we go from here on that? Like such a critical play. Like if they get that, they had momentum. If they score, there's a lot of what ifs there.
Hey, Willie, better look, or just like, look, you got Gene's territory there. How about a better explanation?
Yeah, and he thought they got it, right? He said, I thought they had it.
Why they chose one official spot over the other official spot. That happens all the time, where two officials will have different spots. But what is the protocol of, like, why you choose the guy down bottom or why you choose the guy up top? Like what is the reason why you would take one official spot over there? Like, it happens every play. There's got to be a reason. So why was that official spot chosen? Like, no explanation whatsoever. And you're exactly right in terms of camera angles. Like, I got one for you. Like, we fly high school drones, drones over high school fields in Tennessee. Like, I know we got Skycam and stuff like that. Like, stay right over the ball. Like, so sometimes the camera angles are a little bit of an angle. Like, stay right over the ball and, like, know exactly where the guy was. Like, there is definitely a way that technology can make this better.
D-Mace, you there?
Yeah, talking to Tim Hasselbeck. I have my mic on mute. Talking to Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst and head coach of the Ensworth Tigers. Going back to the draft, because this was a question that Adam asked us before, a segment before you got on, about Tennessee moving from 1 to 6 to 17, and then ultimately somewhere in that drafting Will Howard later. If the Titans do go down that road, why not just allow Will Levis? Because essentially he's Will Levis, but maybe a year behind. Why not just keep Will Levis if you are more inclined to draft a quarterback in the 4th round or 5th round? Why not keep Will Levis? He's not costing you any money, and then you don't have another quarterback on the roster under contract right now. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right about that. Like, look, just because somebody's not your starter doesn't mean you don't keep them on your roster. Look, there's a point where, look, I'm sure Seattle thought Drew Lock was the guy, and then they got Geno Smith, and, like, guess what? Like, Drew Lock was still there, right? Like, I do think that, I mean, it just, as long as you don't think it's going to disrupt your quarterback room, as long as you don't think that it's going to be like a disruptor, for you in terms of the guy's attitude and work ethic, and I can't imagine it would be with Will Levis, then I think you do. Because, look, we see it every year. Look, but by the end of the year, we're watching some of these football games where, especially late in the year, it feels like preseason games because guys are so injured and there aren't quarterbacks to play. Now, looking at the quarterbacks that are going to be in free agency, obviously the Jets don't know what they're going to do quite yet with Aaron Rodgers. If the Jets decide to move on from Aaron Rodgers, do you think there will be, because right now it seems like everybody's like, I don't want to touch Rodgers. What comes with Rodgers is some other stuff that we don't want to deal with. But we know how this league is. If you need a quarterback, ultimately, if he's the best available quarterback out there and you still feel he has some good play in him, you're going to go get him regardless of what he brings. So if indeed Aaron Rodgers gets into free agency, do you think there will be more than one suitor for him?
Yes, I do. Because exactly what you just said. Like, I mean, Now, look, I think if you were going to rank free agents, look, I'd rank Sam Darnold in front of Aaron Rodgers. Right? Like I would, but where would you rank Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers if that happened? Like, where, like, do you know what I mean? Like, is Rodgers ahead of Cousins? Like, I mean, Cousins could maybe be more expensive. So, look, yeah, I think there are going to be enough teams that are looking for somebody. I do think, Aaron's a little different than Kirk because, like, Kirk might be okay, not being the guy potentially, whereas, like, we know that there's no shot Aaron would do that. So, yeah, I think ultimately there'll be more than one team that's interested in him. Now, whether they would be interested in him and the price that he wants, I think is maybe the thing that I would be less sure about.
Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst, joining us on D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick. Tim, always a pleasure to speak to you. We'll talk next week.
Sounds good. See you, fellas.
Tim Hasselbeck joining us on the program. 615-737-1025. If you want to react to anything that Tim had to say, you can call us. You can text us, 615-737-1025. There was something that Willie brought up that I found to be quite interesting, and so did Tim. So pat yourself on the back, Willie. We'll discuss that next. But before we do you want to win tickets to a Preds game? Then be listening to Robbie and Rexro tomorrow morning for Preds Pick to Click. All you have to do is guess a Preds goal scorer, and if they put the puck in the back of the net, you win. Be listening tomorrow morning for the cue to call on Robbie and Rexro. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 the game. Willie, you brought up something to Tim Hasselbeck in the previous segment that I found to be quite interesting. As we take our final look back at the AFC title game before we turn our attention to the Super Bowl, which will be here in less than 2 weeks. Eagles and Chiefs for the second time in 3 years.
By the way, there was no sign of Chiefs fatigue with the ratings. The ratings were
I did
huge.
not see the ratings.
Richard Deitch does a really good media column in The Athletic.
He does.
And he believes, I didn't look at the specifics, but he said there was no sign of Chiefs fatigue in the ratings of the Bills game. And he believes that despite the rematch and the Chiefs, being there every year, whatever, that he believes that it's got a chance to be the highest rated Super Bowl in the last, I don't know how many years. Like comparing it to pre-cable is hard to do. Like he talked about the Dwight Clark game, The Catch. There were like 69 million people watching back then because most people only had 5 or 6 channels at the time. So you could get massive audiences for the big games. And we don't live in that age anymore. But and I'll pull it up, Richard's piece. But he got to another point in that column that I thought was really compelling, especially if you're a Bills fan. And that is that they, for the 4th and 1, D-Mace, they had 80 cameras on hand for the game. And it was a great broadcast. And Richard Deitch went through some pieces that he thought the announcers did a great job of pointing out. And one of the things that he talked about was they immediately identified what Tim was talking about, where the one official from the top of your screen comes running down. His feet are clearly straddling the yellow line. He's like, he's got it. And then here comes the guy from the bottom of the screen, and he's got a different spot. And then they go through the process. I couldn't really see a good camera angle out of the 80 cameras that they had that really showed you a good look. Suddenly, it's the Chiefs' ball. And then right after they do that, Gene Sarator in the aftermath says, I think he got it by a third of the football. So what happened? Like it happened so fast. That was the game right there. That was the first thing you texted us, D-Mace, after the game. So what were your thoughts on that? Like, I feel like that's not getting discussed enough.
No, it's not. I think the NFL wants to get far away from it. They haven't discussed it on ESPN. And I don't think I've heard it on any other outlet either. I think the league wants to get as far away from that narrative as possible because, listen, the narrative was out there before entering into the AFC Championship game. And then you have plays like that. And then there were other plays. You can go back to the catch not catch that was a catch by Worthy. To me, the defensive player had control of the ball and the ball hit the ground. And Worthy never put 2 hands on the ball until he landed on the ground, whereas the defensive back had both of his hands on it. So that should have been awarded to, at least to me, Buffalo or an incomplete pass. And that's another thing that Sarator said, that the ball hit the ground, and that's what they were sort of going back and forth with. So it wasn't just the where do you spot the ball, it was was that really a catch, and who had control of the ball prior to them hitting the ground. But listen, Willie, you've said this before, and I said this to y'all over text, like the league has advanced so much and good for them. But you can't tell me throughout all of that advancement of the NFL, AI, technology, anything, analytics, everything that helps football, get better. You can't tell me y'all haven't developed a chip you can put in the ball and know exactly, especially on situations like this, know exactly where the placement of the ball should be. Because what I think happened is, on the initial push, the far side, the first guy or girl that came in, he had where they saw the ball went. And then as the play continued, he gets pushed back. The other ref runs in and spots it, where they see the ball. And it goes to the question, like you said, Willie, well, if that's the case, who ultimately makes the decision after looking at all the film? who ultimately makes the decision to say, you know what, we're going to go with you and mark them short rather than going with the person that ran in first? That's what the league is not saying. And I think that's why people are sort of a little confused about, to say the least.
615-737-1025. We'll continue to take your thoughts on that. But I did hear something this morning that Robbie and Joe were discussing, and I know it. Willie knows it. It's on the minds of a lot of Predators fans. We'll get to that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D-Mace, Van Ginadonic, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. David Janes came in during the break to let me know that we have tickets to give away. How appropriate. If you want to be caller number 4, you will win a pair of tickets to see the Predators face the Vancouver Canucks tomorrow night at Bridgestone Arena. Caller number 4. One important note. The game tomorrow, puck drop, is at 8. It's not at 7, as usual. It's at 8. Canucks and Predators tomorrow at Bridgestone Arena at 8. If you're caller number 4 at 615-737-1025, you will win a pair of tickets to see the Predators take on the Vancouver Canucks. The Canucks coming off of a win last night in St. Louis. They've won a couple of games in a row for the first time in 2 months. A lot of stuff happening around the Canucks. It should be a very interesting game. Speaking of
the
Predators,
late puck drop?
Probably because of Canada.
Yeah, it's a second game of a Canadian doubleheader, I think, with Sportsnet. They're a big rights holder. And so on occasion, I think this happened one other time earlier in the season.
So Willie's going to have to stay up a little bit later.
It's not what the Predators would have chosen to do, but it's as a league, this is sometimes what you get.
It's like what happens in the playoffs, Derek, where the Predators home games will start at 8:30 Central because they're the second half of a doubleheader that goes on at 9:30 Eastern. So same sort of thing with this situation. So 8 o'clock tomorrow instead of the usual 7. I think we have someone who's going to win. David is going to take care of that. So I heard Robbie and Joe this morning talking about something related to the Predators that I think a lot of Predators fans are getting worried about. And that is the performance of UC Saros. UC Saros this season, when you just look at the traditional numbers, wins, saves, save percentage, goals against average, they are not what you typically see when you look at UC Saros' numbers. He is 11, 19, and 6 this season with a .288 goals against average and .900 save percentage. So Robbie and Joe were talking this morning about how over the past couple of years, it seems that Saros is slowly declining in terms of his statistical performance. And I think, Willie, why this stands out, we've seen some bad performances from Saros lately. I also think these games recently against the Sharks, he started the first game, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Correct.
So the Predators are down 5-1 to the worst team in the league. And they battle back, they win that game. But Saros did not perform well at the start of that game. And he got the goal support. Well, not at the time, actually. Correct me if I'm wrong. Annunen came in the second half of that game?
Annunen came in to start the second period.
Okay.
Saros gave up 4 goals in the first period.
That's right.
And they made the switch. Annunen then gave up a goal on the first shot that he faced and then shut him out the rest of the way.
Got it. All right. So my larger point is that the numbers have not been great for UC Saros. And I heard what Robbie and Joe were saying this morning. I've done some of my own research about the performance of UC Saros this season. But let's just start here, Willie, as someone who watches UC Saros game in and game out. What are your feelings on the performance of UC Saros this season, but specifically over the past month and a half?
On Saturday night, after the Predators fell behind, if you didn't watch the game on Saturday night, of course, they had won, 5 in a row?
Yes.
They had come back strong to tie twice. And when they tied it at 2 around the midway point of the second period, I thought they had all the momentum in the game, and I thought they were on the verge of pushing past them. Then came a very shocking 3.5 minutes where they gave up 3 goals. So suddenly, Saros has given up 5, and they could not crawl out of that hole. So the winning streak ends. And when you're in such a deep hole from the standing standpoint, even though you've won 5 in a row, it was just, you could feel it, the weight of where you are you would easily be able to blow that off. But it's weird to have a 5-game winning streak and say, it had to end sometime, get back at it on Wednesday. It seemed to sting a little bit more. So I said on the broadcast, it has just been a mystifying season for UC Soros. There's been a lot of strange stuff that has gone on that has not, and there's a lot of chapters to it. I didn't think he played great at the very start of the season when they lost their first 4 home games. Remember he missed opening night because of a minor injury. Didn't play in the first game of the year. So something went on right at the end of training camp where he wasn't completely healthy. So he got off to a bad start. Then I thought he started playing closer to his best level for a while, but he got absolutely no goal support during that stretch. Remember, they lost 7 consecutive games that went to a 3-on-3. He was in net for all but maybe one of those. So they lost a lot of 3-2 games where it's the third goal being scored in the 3-on-3. But he was excellent during that stretch. Now, recently, I think there's been a lot of hit or miss with his play. And he's had a couple of statistically really bad games that have sunk the overall numbers. So all that to say, the word I use is mystifying. He has not gotten into the groove that he usually gets on during the course of the season. And even last year when he struggled, I think, as badly as he's ever struggled in the first half of the year, in the second half, he did go into that groove. And that's right when they got hot and went 16-0-2. There's still plenty of time for that to happen. I'm not worried about him long-term, but it has not been a great season for him. But nor has it been a great season for virtually any Predator that you want to name. Just go down the list. And it hasn't been a great season. That's why they are where they are.
And Derek, I think the issue that Predators fans are having, what's concerning them about the play of UC Soros, is that he has been the least of their concerns for many years. We are accustomed to seeing UC Soros bail out this team for long stretches. The best example is the second half of the 56-game season. Halfway through that season, they looked dead in the water, and UC Soros almost single-handedly dragged that team into the playoffs. They played the Carolina Hurricanes in that series when the divisions were all mixed up because of COVID. So Predators fans are used to seeing UC Soros play as a Vezina caliber goalie. And this season, especially lately as the team has started winning, they've been winning a lot recently, I would say, because they've been scoring a lot of goals. It hasn't been about tight defense or great goaltending. It's been about, the shooting percentage finally getting to where it probably should be. So I think that's why Predators fans are concerned about where he is. And another thing that I always forget, guys, is that 8-year contract he signed hasn't even started yet. This is the final season of his previous contract. Next season starts the 8-year contract. So I think when you mix all of those things together, Derek, it leads to a situation where Predators fans, I have seen and it's been asked of me if the Predators are having buyer's remorse signing UC Soros to an 8-year contract.
I don't think the organization is having buyer's remorse or signing remorse. Now the fan base, like you said, there may be a faction of them that, are wondering, was that the right move for upper management to make, to sign, UC to a long-term deal? But I think what happened is UC proved that he deserved a long-term deal. And the Nashville Predators honored that. What are they asking UC to do? I understand it's be in net and stop opponents from scoring goals. But what defense is being played in front of them?
It hasn't been great. It hasn't been great.
Exactly.
Lately. That is context. Absolutely. That is important.
Exactly. So you gotta, like I said in football, sometimes the quarterback gets too much of the praise. Sometimes he gets too much of the blame. There's, 10 other guys on the field. And just like hockey, sometimes the goalie gets too much praise and sometimes he gets too much of the blame because I don't think, you know, I think there are a lot of people here that love hockey. That just love the Nashville Predators because it's their team. But if you start to ask them individually, like, okay, you love your team, but can you explain like this position or this position, what they're called to do? I don't think many people can do that. And it goes as well as the football realm. Like people love football, but if you ask them to sort of dissect it, it's hard for them to do. So when the fan base starts to get buyer's remorse, are you looking at the other sort of context things that maybe the Predators are looking at? That's why they don't feel like they have sort of buyer's remorse in this case. But make no mistake about it, UC has to play better. He has to. If this team wants to get to, you know, where they want to go, ultimately, it may not happen this year. More than likely it won't. But next year, UC has to play better hockey. He can't be the reason why they're losing games on a regular basis. And I think fans believe, you know, especially now, yeah, the team wasn't playing well, but everyone looked at UC to be that stabilizer, and he just hadn't been that guy this season.
Dustin is in Hopkinsville on our phone line, driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com. Dustin, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
What's up, guys? On the UC Saros thing, I said it before we signed him to the big deal. He did not do enough for me to sign him for 8 years. Pekka Rinne, that type would get me 8 years. But we have had this conversation. This is now 2 years in a row. And what does UC Saros do in the playoffs usually? He lays a goose egg. The rest of the team does too, but he's right there with them. Okay, his physical attributes. He's a short guy. Put me out there. I'll block too. I'm 5'9", you know. But if I've got to peek around, if I'm not at least at eye level with all the players in front of me, I've already got the odds stacked against me. Why did we sign this guy to 8 years? I love Juice, person, love him as a player, but man, go get a tall guy that can stretch out there. Go looking for that next Pekka Rinne. We should not have signed this guy to 8 years. Also on the Will Howard thing, I've been on this guy since they played Tennessee in the CFB playoffs. I feel like he's got all the attributes that Will Levis has that are good, and he's got it between the ears, and he showed us he's going to show up in the big games every game. And someone said they got a lot of pieces around Will Howard. Are we not going to put him around a bunch of good pieces in the NFL? Let's go. Go after Will Howard. Get a bunch of draft picks. Let's start winning. And for the GM coming in, that's the best thing he can do, because if you go get a Kirk Cousins, you keep Will Howard and you get Levis for cheap, and you get them two competing behind Kirk Cousins or whoever, Stafford you get. It's a win-win situation. You win football now. You keep the fans slightly happy, and you don't make mistakes. Next two out are Callahan and Brooker, and you move right up, and you got the full deck of cards for you. You had a winning season. I think Will Howard.
Thank you for the call. Thank you for the call, Dustin.
Yeah, we're talking about the Saros.
I appreciate the Will Howard stuff. We can get back into that later. But before we go to break,
I want to say something quickly.
I do. Okay, go ahead, Derek.
About UC Saros. Listen, I understand. See, this is once again the nuances, the thing that the average person, you know, they may not necessarily understand about hockey. For one, I think when you're a goalie, you're never eye level with anyone because you're always crouched down. So that's one. And then two, I think UC has shown enough that, listen, he's been on the Vezina Trophy, the Vezina list for what, the last, minus this year.
He's been
2 or 3 years.
He's been up there for many years.
He's finished in the top 6 of the Vezina, which is the Cy Young of goalies.
Mm-hmm.
Top 6 for 4 straight years. That is consistent elite play.
Exactly. So it's
so
not
when
like
you say, why did we sign? Yeah, why did we sign this guy? Well, that's why. 4 consecutive years of finishing in the top 6. That is consistent elite play.
which means you got one of the top 10 goalies in all of hockey for the last 4 years. Everybody has sort of this rocky and down year. Every athlete, the greatest of them all, they don't have great seasons every year. What you see, like I said, what you see has to do, he has to bounce back. He has to start playing a lot better. But then two, listen, they all have to understand how this game is going to be played amongst one another, based upon what Coach Bruno is teaching. It seems like from an offensive output, they're figuring that out now, hence a lot of the goal scoring. But on the defensive end, it's still slacking a little bit. So I think once they get all that together, I think you'll see a different UC Saros. I think you'll see the UC Saros, and it may be next season. I think you'll see the UC Saros that we have been seeing.
I do have some numbers that I pulled that I think are telling of this situation. I also do want to respond quickly to something. I'll do this on the other side that the caller discussed as it relates to UC Saros, because it's a common narrative in all of this. But 615-737-1025. If you have thoughts on the Predators, UC Saros, we'll get into them next. Willie Dunnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game.
Time to tell you about Lee Company, 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com. In business since 1944, proud sponsor of our Nashville Predators coverage. We're talking Preds right now. They're in action tomorrow night against the Vancouver Canucks. With that said, make sure you have your heating unit working properly. We're out of the frigid temperatures, much nicer today, but is it working properly? If not, give them a call, 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com. Also, think ahead to the warmer months. When's the last time you had your air conditioning unit checked? They can do that for you. Plus, an array of other things at their disposal. General maintenance, home or at work, at your business. If you don't have a maintenance department in your business, you can call Lee Company, 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com. Other projects as well, like your plumbing, your electric, and they have a year-round coverage system as well called the Home Maintenance Plan. It's all why Lee Company's been in great service in our area since 1944. LeeCompany.com, 615-567-1000, proud sponsor, Nashville Predators.
Nashville's best deal this week is Single Tree Barbecue in Murfreesboro. Single Tree Barbecue is a local veteran-owned and operated business, only serving world-class barbecue with the perfect combination of sides and desserts. Get half off a $25 gift card now while supplies last at theGameNashville.com/deals. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan talking Predators, specifically UC Saros. Bob is in Antioch on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Bob, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, guys. What do you think the Predators should do? But both, as they wind up this year and looking into next year, it's pretty remote that they're going to make the playoffs. So not what do you think they will do? It's what do you think that they should do in order to make the team better in the future brighter?
That's a good question, Bob. Maybe we can get to that after the UC Saros discussion, because I do think that is an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I think the reality is every time you lose a game, you come back to the conclusion it's a long shot. Tons has to go right for you to even dream about it. So at the time you have before the trade deadline, I think you have to look at yourself as a seller, and with the idea that you're going to try to be a bounce back team for next year. I think that's the mindset. It's been pretty clear. But let's get back to Saros for a second here.
So I pulled these numbers, I believe, on Sunday. So maybe the rankings changed by 1 or 2, but not enough to change the conversation. So UC Saros on November 23rd, home game against the then best team in the league, Winnipeg Jets. The Predators win that game. UC Saros is in goal for that game. I wanted to pull his starts since then because it was a nice round number. He's made 20 starts since that win against the Jets on November 23rd. Here are his numbers in those 20 starts. 329 goals against average, 883 save percentage. There have been 53 goalies in the NHL who have played at least 10 games since late November. And by games played, I mean starts, or even if they come on in relief. If they've been in a game, it counts. There have been 53 goalies who have played at least 10 games since late November when UC Saros won that game against Winnipeg. In that 2-month stretch, Saros is 44th out of 53 in save percentage, 45th out of 53 in goals against average, and 49th out of 53 in the statistic called goals saved above expected, which is a fancy way of saying that this is what goals saved above expected is, because I'm going to get into it a little bit later. Simply put, it measures the amount of goals a goalie saves based on the quality of shots that he faces. So if you think of a goalie standing on his head, making these incredible saves, saving shots that should be goals, but a goalie gets in the way, that's a goal saved above expected. And it's in percent, it's in decimal points. It's very fancy. My point is that UC Saros has allowed 4.3 goals above expected over the past 2 months, which is 49th out of 53, which means based on the quality of shots that UC Saros has faced over the past 2 months, he has allowed 4.3 more goals than he should have. That's the simplest way of explaining that statistic.
Right, but what you're not pointing out is he was way up there in that stat.
He was.
Prior to that.
He was.
If we're looking at the year as a whole, it's been up and down. So I don't want to bore people with the stats. I would say that where you get your goals saved versus expected, you will see a different number depending on the site you look at. We look at Sportlogic, which we believe is the best. There are some free sites that have an attempt at goals saved versus expected or goals saved above expected. I don't think they really have it as well calculated as a paid site like Sportlogic. And then there's something called Clear Site Analytics, which I think is also on the cutting edge. People look at when they evaluate goalies. So if you look at the year that Saros has had, he still is better than average for the season in goals saved versus expected. He saved 7 more goals than he should have allowed, because part of the issue is what Derek pointed out in the last segment, that Nashville as a defensive team ranks 24th in expected goals against as a defense, 24th out of 32 teams. Their defensive coverage has not been good all year long. So that's making it tougher on their goalies. And it is definitely, and Here's I think where the discussion really lies, Adam. This is the main point. To whom much is given, much is expected. UC Saros has been, I would say, about league average for the year. He's had an average season. But when you invest big in a goalie, you expect more than that. And I think UC Saros would be the first to tell you that he hasn't had a great year. We are used to seeing him elevate his team, keep them afloat. I think we can look at a lot of nights where he did do that and just got no goal support.
He did that in the first quarter, first 20-plus games of the season. If not for him, through late November, they would have been even further down the standings than they are right now.
Which is hard to believe.
Yes.
So you did a stat of quality starts. That's another metric that people use. SportLogic has the goalies that have had over 20 quality starts. Now, he plays a lot of games, but he is one of, 6 or 8 goalies that have
so
over 20 quality starts.
So to explain quality starts to everybody, I'll try to not make this as nerdy as possible, which is hard to do when having these discussions. As I adjust my glasses, I'm only missing an inhaler here as I'm having this conversation and a pocket protector. So a quality start is any start in which a goalie records a positive goal saved above expected. So if UC Saros plays so well that he saves the Predators an extra goal, that is a quality start. When he allows more goals than he should, that is not a quality start. Using that late November threshold that I did, 14 of his first 17 starts were quality starts, which means that he saved the Predators more goals than he should have in 14 of his first 17 starts. In his past 20 starts, he has 8 quality starts, which means 12 of 20, he has allowed more goals than he should have based on the quality of shots he's facing.
Right. But I think the other point that needs to be made in there is in the quality starts.
Yes.
He doesn't have, he has a lot lower of a one-loss record than his peers in their quality starts.
Last I checked, his win-loss record in those starts, those 22 quality starts, was 11-9-2.
Yeah,
so
I think he's had one more since that. I think it's 12-9-2.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a lot lower than his colleagues. When they have the quality start, their numbers are outstanding. They're pristine one-loss record. So that's part of the reason where he has so many losses. A lot of times, it's like a pitcher who pitches a really good game but loses 2-1 because the other pitcher was a little better or they just didn't get any run support. But again, in a nutshell, he hasn't had a good year. He hasn't been bad. He's been about league average. There are a lot of circumstances. The defense in front of him isn't very good. So I would say, if I'm answering the question in a 10-second clip, he hasn't been great. The team around him hasn't been great. But I understand the question of, if you're paying for the goalie needs to elevate the rest of the team. That's where he has not done it. But do I think that there's any worry about decline in the long term? No. My money has always been on UC Saros over the long haul. There's going to be dips and ups and downs. When he goes on a roll, he is as good as any goalie in the league. He can carry you for weeks. He did it last year after struggling around this time of the year. He was having a struggle last year and then got it in gear. And it may be too late to save the season this year. But I still have, in the long term, looking at his contract, he's not that old. He stays in shape. He works extremely hard. We've already addressed the size and everything. That's not a factor to me. Let's also remember that the average save percentage goes down. So when you say, well, his save percentage has gone down, the league save percentage has gone down for a lot of reasons. That's another nerdy talk that we'll save.
I
believe he's in decline? No, I do not. I think he's in a dip.
I would quibble with one thing, and then, Derek, I want your opinion on something I'm going to present to the both of you. I would quibble with this. I think when you look at his overall season, from the start of it to now, he's probably league average. He has been below league average for the past couple of months.
Yeah,
but
that doesn't. So he could be above league average.
He
for
was.
the last couple months,
I would say
right?
he was at the beginning of the season.
Well, I'm saying in the next 2 months he could bounce back, and by the end of the year, we need to look at his numbers at the end of the year. I grant you, he's in a dip. There's no question about it.
So, Derek, this is what I would love your opinion on.
Mhm.
Here's one thing I think I would suggest to the Predators if I had the opportunity to do so. There are roughly 30 games left in the season, 33, 34 games left in the season. This season, as we both have noted, we all have noted, this season is probably a lost cause in terms of making the playoffs. It is going to take something that has probably never been done for this team to make the playoffs, considering how many games they have left in the season. If I were the Predators, I would use the rest of the season, knowing that I have to worry about UC Saros, among others, next season in the first year of an 8-year contract. I would significantly limit the amount of games he plays the rest of the season. I would go to a close to, maybe not exactly, but I would go to as close to a 50-50 split in starts as I can with Annunen. Annunen's been playing really well since he joined the Predators, in a way to sort of give UC Saros as much of a reset as he can and not to overwork him, because that's another concern Predators fans have, that they've played him too much over the past few years. I would pull back significantly on the starts that they're giving him, starts that they would normally give him. I would give a few of those to Annunen, and I would try to, as best I can, preserve Saros for the remainder of the season, so that in the first year of his new contract next season, he's back to where we all know he can be. What do you think of that idea?
I think it's a good idea in theory if you know it has to match what you're looking to accomplish the second half of the season. That's what it has to do. If you're not looking to get the most out of the season and make a run and cross your fingers and hope that teams above you start to lose, if you're not in that mode, then yeah, okay, let's kind of scale it back some. We feel Annunen can come in and get us some wins, so it's not like we're just completely throwing the season away, but also we get an opportunity to rest UC Saros because he's played a lot of hockey over the last 2 or 3 years, and whereas he's been good, but each and every year his goal against has gone up. This may be his worst season outside of his first season, which he only played 1 game really. This may go down as being his worst season of all. So if that is indeed the case, allow him to rest some, and then maybe he can sort of recapture some of that what he had at the beginning of the season, because this was a team that was fighting and they were trying to figure things out. So UC probably was in net a little bit more than what they probably wanted, and then they trade a goalie during the season as well. So if indeed your sort of plan isn't to make a run at the end, hopefully cross your fingers and some teams lose above us and we got a shot at the end. If that's not your goal, then what you said, Adam, I would agree with. Allow this man to get some rest, allow Annunen to play, and it may work out for the better, because now Annunen is getting the crucial time that he needs in this league.
Let's finish on this point. No pun intended. If he were in decline, as some are worried about, why would Finland, who has a lot of great goalies, choose him to be the guy for the Four Nations face-off? I think that tells you what they think of UC Saros. He's going to figure it out. It's disappointing, but remember, this was the lowest scoring team in the NHL until about 2 weeks ago, right? It's been a tough year for the team, and he has not elevated them. But you can go down the list one by one. Everybody has struggled. Even Philip Forsberg, who's played brilliant hockey the last month or so, is down from his production from last year. They've got a host of problems. It's every guy.
But just because you may take some games away from him And I'm talking about the Nashville Predators. I'm not even talking about the fans. This would be their idea. But even if you take some games away from him, I don't think you're saying I believe he's declining as a player. I think what you're saying is because NFL teams do this, basketball teams do this, and I'm sure Major League Baseball teams do this. When you know that there's really no conceivable way that you're going to make the playoffs, and if you got a guy that is maybe dealing with some injuries and playing through them, but he's not playing well, and I'm not insinuating UC is dealing with something, but even if a guy is struggling a little bit, maybe you just want to sit him down for a while.
No,
allow
I'm
him
with.
to regroup.
I think it's a fair idea if they continue to be out of it, to definitely not have him lead the league in appearances. I think that's a fair thing. I mean, they have to cross that bridge when they come to it. But I would say if I were to give UC Saros a grade for the season, I would give him a C. And if I'm grading him on a curve, I might take a notch down just for him because I expect so much from him. But here we are just past the halfway point, getting close to the 2/3 part. I still think the last third could be a bounce back. I don't think there's anything issues. I don't think there's any issues with him physically. I would like to. He's now starting to get a little more goal support. I would like to see the defensive coverage improve. That these are things that I think are important for the vision of the team next year. There was a really good article, Adam, in The Athletic, if you're into these things, of the challenges of where their roster is right now. And for a bounce back, it's not a given, right? If you look at the age of their core of a bounce back next year, they believe they can do it, but there's a lot that has to be determined between now and the end of this season as they make their moves.
615-737-1025. Predators and Canucks tomorrow at 8. I stress again, 8. Puck drop at 8 tomorrow at Bridgestone Arena. Also, I would like to give a hearty congratulations to Craig Aukerman, who has a job. Craig Aukerman hired by the Miami Dolphins. Congratulations, Craig. We knew that you would not be out of the NFL for long. Jared Stillman's favorite punching bag back in the NFL. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, speaking of things on the text line, I saw something on the text line yesterday as we were discussing Shedeur Sanders that got me thinking, and I want to hear what specifically Derek has to say about it. Coming up next, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D Mace Vingan and Donick 1025 1063 the game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Glad we could sneak some Predators talk into this. But let's get back to the NFL draft. We spent a lot of time yesterday talking about Shedeur Sanders, who met with the Titans at the Shrine Bowl. He didn't practice at the Shrine Bowl. He didn't play in the Shrine Bowl, which I think is Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. But he did meet with the Titans. We heard some of the things he had to say. We talked to Teron Davenport, who was at the Shrine Bowl. But while we were having this conversation, Derek, we had one texter who kept texting in, and I monitor the text line, and I did not respond to the texter, but it got me thinking. And the texter said, why are we spending so much time talking about Shedeur Sanders as the number 1 overall pick? What has he won? What has he done to deserve to be the number 1 pick in the draft? So it got me thinking again, as I said, and I just decided to look at the win-loss records of quarterbacks selected number 1 overall in the draft since 2015, since it was 10 years ago. I thought that was a nice sample. These were the quarterbacks who were drafted number 1 overall since 2015. Jameis Winston, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Bryce Young, and Caleb Williams. A nice sample, wouldn't you say? A nice mix of quarterbacks. So I went and looked at their records as starters in college and any other accolades they earned during their collegiate career. Let's start at the top. Let's start with Jameis Winston. Does everybody remember that Jameis Winston went 26-1 as a starter at Florida State?
Oh, yeah.
He won the Heisman Trophy and the national championship. A celebrated collegiate career for Jameis Winston. Do either of you know what Jared Goff's record at Cal was as a quarterback before being taken number 1 in the draft?
It was, I don't think I watched Cal play when Jared Goff was the quarterback.
It's got to be good, right?
He went 14. No. He went 14-23 as a starter at Cal.
Cal wasn't good.
He went 14-23 as a starter at Cal. I know this is simplifying this conversation to its smallest possible form. I think we would all take Jared Goff over Jameis Winston right now. I think that would be pretty fair. So I'm looking at Shedeur Sanders. So Colorado went 13-12 in 2 seasons with Shedeur Sanders and, of course, Deion Sanders coaching the program. Now, if I recall correctly, the year before the Sanders family arrived, Colorado went 1-11, if I have that.
I believe
correctly.
That's right.
You are correct.
So they went 13-12, Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders together in 2 seasons at Colorado. Colorado was 1-7 over those 2 seasons against ranked opponents. So 13-12 overall, 1-7 against ranked opponents. He did go 23-3 at Jackson State. Now, of course, it's a much different caliber of competition at Jackson State than it is at Colorado. And even then, the caliber of competition at Colorado isn't the same that Jameis Winston faced at FSU or Joe Burrow faced at LSU or Trevor Lawrence faced at Clemson or Bryce Young at Alabama. So there you have to factor.
It's a slight notch down.
Yes.
It's a diluted conference that isn't quite the powerhouse that maybe it was a decade ago or 2.
So I even looked at Cam Ward because I didn't want to pick on Shedeur Sanders. Cam Ward with Miami this past season, they went 10-3. Great start. Fell apart down the stretch, missed the college football playoff. I believe he spent 2 seasons at Washington State before transferring to Miami. Washington State went 12-13 in those 2 seasons where Cam Ward was their primary quarterback. So all of this is to say, Derek, when evaluating a quarterback's capabilities, how much should their collegiate accomplishments, specifically wins and losses, championships, Heismans, whatever, how much of that should factor in to figuring out if a player is worthy of being the number 1 overall pick, a quarterback specifically?
Listen, the Heisman shouldn't be a part of it because there's only one guy every year that can win the Heisman. And frankly, we understand sometimes, quarterbacks have won the Heisman when they frankly shouldn't have.
I was shocked, by the way. I should have remembered this, that Trevor Lawrence did not win the Heisman Trophy.
No, he didn't.
Clemson.
He didn't win Heisman. So, whether it's the Heisman Trophy, whether it's a national championship, I don't think you can, make your evaluation of whether a quarterback is good or not because he's not winning individual accolades or he's not winning the national championship. You know, there are a bunch of quarterbacks that hadn't won a national championship, but then they got in the NFL and they were very successful. The greatest quarterback of them all right now, Tom Brady. He didn't win the national championship. I don't even think he came close to a national championship, if I recall. Because they won it with Woodson, but he wasn't there. That was long ago. I don't think he won the national championship.
No, they did not win the national championship.
Yeah,
I think they made it to the Rose Bowl one time. I think he played in the Rose Bowl one time against Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. Was that the Sean Alexander? But he shared time. Remember, Drew Henson was there. Like he was a good college quarterback for sure, but certainly wasn't like Trevor Lawrence in the mix for national titles every year that he was.
So by the way, so these are the college records. These are the college records for the quarterback selected number 1 overall since 2015. Jameis Winston as a starter at Florida State, 26-1, won the Heisman, won the national title. Jared Goff, 14-23 as a starter at Cal. Baker Mayfield, 34-6 at Oklahoma. Kyler Murray, 12-2 as a starter at Oklahoma because he started just one season. Joe Burrow, 25-3 at LSU. Trevor Lawrence, 34-2 at Clemson. Bryce Young, 24-3 at Alabama. Caleb Williams, 18-8 at USC.
So I would look at those and say there's not much of a correlation, D-Mace. Not much of a correlation between wins and losses in college and your success in the pros.
Exactly. Whether you won a lot at the college level as a quarterback or you didn't. Did you do the things or are you doing the things that are necessary that is going to allow you to excel in the NFL? If you're doing those things, then okay. But it's not like Shedeur Sanders, if you look at it. He's been the reason why they've lost games. You look at the Kansas game. He threw for 3 touchdowns, no interception, 23 for 29, 266 yards. They lost that game 31-21. Then go to Kansas State, 31-28. He threw 3 touchdowns, had an interception, almost threw for 400 yards, 34 for 40. Is that his fault? And he was sacked 6 times. Is that his fault? No, it's not his fault. He did everything humanly possible to win a football game that they ultimately didn't win. So, again, it's all about the nuances. If you're just going to look at the wins and loss records, then you might as well not draft half of these quarterbacks that get drafted, especially in the first round. You know, you can go to Josh Allen. He didn't have a great career in college when it comes to wins and losses. Look at him now. So I know we're talking about number 1 picks, but when you turn on the film, if you are drafting number 1 and you're looking for a quarterback and you've earmarked 1 or 2 guys, like as they are doing now, turn on the film. If he's checking all the boxes that you need to be checked in order to draft a guy number 1, then you know what? If y'all all in agreement, then you draft that guy not based on whether, you know, he won games or national championships or not. Are you turning on the film? And is he the reason why they are winning games? And he's not the reason that they are losing games. And he's doing the things that you're asking him that he needs to do in the NFL. If you see that in him, then you draft him. I don't care if he won a national championship or a Heisman or not.
By the way, of all of those quarterbacks, Willie, that have been drafted number 1 overall since 2015, Jared Goff is the only one that didn't win a Heisman Trophy or a national championship. All of the rest won both or one of the 2. Goff is the only one that didn't win any of them.
I go back to a year that we discussed backwards and forwards because the Titans had the 3rd pick. And it was the year we had that epic championship game between Texas and USC, the loaded USC team with Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, all those guys, Lendell White, just a stacked Pete Carroll group against Vince Young and Texas, another stacked roster with all kinds. And it was one of the greatest college bowl games or, you know, championship games of all time. And Vince Young was the star. Both Matt Leinart and Vince Young were high 1st-round picks. So was Jay Cutler, who had played in front of our eyes for 4 years at Vanderbilt and taken his lumps on a program that was at the bottom, even by Vanderbilt status, at the bottom when Bobby Johnson took over. Like, he picked up the pieces for Woody Woodenhofer after the wheels fell off of his group. So in the context, on the surface, if you just go by the accolades, like why would you take Jay Cutler over Matt Leinart or Vince Young? But we discussed it a lot. And as it turned out, all these years later. Jay Cutler had a better NFL career. I don't think it's arguable. A better NFL career than Vince Young or Matt Leinart, and it really wasn't even close. So again, I thought Tim Hasselbeck had some great insights on Will Howard, who, when you play with a loaded roster around you, your job should become easier. There's a lot of good things that go with it, but it also does make your life easier as a quarterback. You should succeed more than a guy who's playing around a roster that has a lot more challenges.
615-737-1025. I read something interesting about the quarterback position in the Washington Post. Not normally a sentence you hear when we're talking about sports reporting, but I thought it could lead into an interesting discussion about what the Titans could do at quarterback. That's coming up next. Willie Darnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. I was reading something interesting in the Washington Post. It came out before conference championship weekend. The headline, why NFL teams, quote, just lose their mind, end quote, when paying quarterbacks. The price of a starting quarterback is rising faster than the salary cap, even for those who can't last in the playoffs. And it's a really interesting story, and there are a lot of different layers to uncover. But the one thing that I was just sharing with Willie that I thought was interesting was this. This is from the story, quote, in the NFL salary landscape, the time a quarterback signs his contract matters just as much as, if not more, than his quality as a player, which I think we would all agree with, right? The pressure of precedent that teams are trying to, when multiple quarterbacks are up for a contract, you want to be the one that gets your quarterback signed first, because you don't want to be the team with the other quarterback that says, well, this guy just
use
signed
him
for
as
this
a comparable.
much. Exactly.
That only raises the bar further.
Right. So in the NFL salary landscape, the time a quarterback signs his contract matters just as much as, if not more, than his quality as a player. Again, this was written before conference championship weekend. The 9 highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL by the average annual value of their contract all signed extensions in the past 2 years. And I pulled up those quarterbacks because they did not list them. Those quarterbacks in order: Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, and Jalen Hurts. So those are the 9 highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL by average annual value of their contracts. Only 3 of them have appeared in the Super Bowl: Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, and Jared Goff. None have won it yet. Hurts could do it in a couple of weeks. 2, Tua Tagovailoa and Justin Herbert, haven't even won a single playoff game. And only one, Jalen Hurts, was still alive in the postseason as of this past weekend.
So Hurts has gone back for a second time on the second contract. I think that's a distinction they're not making there. Jalen Hurts 2 years ago was the second round pick who was very cheap, like the Titans hoped Will Levis would be, and wasn't. But Jalen Hurts made a big jump, got him to the Super Bowl, almost won it, and then earned a big contract off of that. And now he's got him back there. So that's been a good investment, I think. It's interesting. Patrick Mahomes is not on the list. Not in there.
Well, he signed.
Well, Patrick redid his deal like
he
3
keeps
years ago.
Right, and he kept redoing it. So the other part of this, only 3 have made the Super Bowl. Well, Patrick Mahomes has made so many Super Bowls. That takes up a lot of real estate. And then Tom Brady is in that equation over the last several years too, a bunch of times. So that leaves not a lot of other quarterbacks on the list that have made a Super Bowl. So I'm trying to shoot holes a little bit in that. But the point is well taken.
Away.
The point is well taken that when you make it, you're making a heavy investment. We talked about it at the time with Tua and Love signing in particular, and Lawrence. You make the big purchase before you've had any success at all, really, to speak of in the playoffs. That's a big risk.
This was a quote, Derek, that I thought was really fascinating. This was from the story. Quote, though it has become standard practice, some in the league question the wisdom of paying top dollar to any entrenched young starting quarterback. To illustrate the frenzy, one GM presented a hypothetical scenario. A pass rusher with the pedigree of being chosen in the first round authors a breakout, though not Pro Bowl level, season on the precipice of becoming eligible for a contract extension. The GM then says, quote, just because he's up, I'm not going to put him ahead of TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. It's the one position, being quarterback, that some of these teams / owners just lose their mind over.
Because they understand that is the ultimate elixir. That's what ultimately determines games, is if you have that quarterback or you don't have that quarterback. Now, listen, there's not, 15 elite quarterbacks. Hell, there may only be 3 or 4 elite quarterbacks in this league. So everybody's trying to, I think their wires are sort of mixed up in regards to the sort of realistically what you can get and, playing that sort of game of, what do you call it? Fantasy football, where I can get this number one guy, I can get a guy signed to this huge contract, and he's going to lead us to a Super Bowl. More times than not, it doesn't work out that way. What you have to figure out is this. Okay, I understand I got to get a quarterback. Every quarterback can't be Patrick Mahomes. Every quarterback can't be Lamar Jackson. Every quarterback can't be Joe Burrow. Like I said, there's only a handful of elite quarterbacks. But I still have to get a quarterback that can win games. Because if I get a quarterback that can win games and not lose me game, then I could build my roster around such a thing, that particular quarterback. So then now you gotta start to ask yourself, how much am I going to pay that guy? Do I overpay him because I'm close, or do I go out and just get somebody, that may not be to that standard, and I end up paying them a little bit less? Well, where would that put my team? If I go out and I pay a little bit more for a guy that I know can win for me, and I already got a team that is capable of winning the Super Bowl, then I'm going down that road. But if I don't have that team, why would I pay that much for that type of quarterback? And that's what a lot of these teams are trying to figure out. But everybody's trying to hit it in that one shot. Every team in the NFL seems to be, I'm just trying to hit that lick one good time. And if I hit it one good time, maybe, just maybe, it can hold me over for 2 or 3 years. But you're not, everybody can't draft the Jaden Daniels. Everybody can't draft the CJ Stroud or Bo Nix, that's doing well in Denver now. Everybody can't draft these quarterbacks that come out and immediately give you good play or great play and lead you to the playoffs. Maybe they're just good and it's going to take some time. But I think these owners are to a point where, the more championships you win, the more value your organization becomes.
This number is not going to change. Hit it. I don't think this number
is not going to change
because of the supply and demand, right? It's
exactly
the reason they're getting these contracts is because of the leverage they get, because sometimes it's so hard. You can spend years trying to find even a good quarterback, right? So when you have a good
everybody's looking for that,
you overpay to keep that guy, but that's the dilemma you get in. You start paying elite money for just good results.
I found this interesting as well in the story in the Washington Post. Quote, the value of top quarterback contracts has swelled in recent years. Since 2020, the largest quarterback contract signed each year has had an annual average value worth at least 22.7% of the salary cap at the time of signing, according to SpotTrack. A decade ago, the largest quarterback contracts were worth roughly 15%.
That's a big number. That's a big difference, I think. Probably underrated.
See, here is what the problem has become. No longer, and I think it changed the year they changed the whole the whole rookie coming in scale, where you just wasn't given money for services not rendered. They were just paying you and you hadn't even played.
Sam Bradford.
I think exactly, you go down to Sam Bradford or not. I think now, because you can't hold these individuals to these long-term contracts, these quarterbacks and these wide receivers and these defensive ends, the league has figured out, player-wise and agent-wise, only thing I have to do is sign a 3-year deal. If I hit on that 3-year deal, then I sign another 3-year deal. No longer are these guys signing 6, 7-year deals. They used to do that back in the day. Rookies came in if you were the top pick, and you were with a team for 6 years before they even had to redo your contract, and you even got to franchise tagging you. Now, if you're not a first rounder, you're looking at potentially a new contract after your second year, especially if you hit it big on the first 2 years. You're looking to redo your contract in that third year, and teams are sort of pressured into doing it. Why? Because they don't want to lose you to free agency, or they don't want to have to pay that big tag during if indeed they have to franchise tag you. So these players and these agents have gotten smarter, and the league can't do anything about it. I'm not walking in. If I'm a rookie and I come in and I draft in the second round, I'm 20 years old. I played that 2 years, so I'm 22. If I'm up for another contract, you think I'm signing a 5-6 year deal? No, I'm signing a 4-year deal. Why? Because I'm betting on me continuing to get better. And when I finally reach my peak at 28, now I'm on my third contract. Now it's even bigger. So and there's nothing the league can do about it now.
There was another quote in here from Lee Steinberg, the old player agent.
Yes, at one time he was probably the king of quarterback agents.
Yes.
He had everybody, it seemed like.
So Lee Steinberg was quoted in this story, Willie, and he said, and this is a question that the Titans are going to have to ask themselves as they look for their next quarterback. Lee Steinberg said, quote, "The critical questions for many teams became, even if the player was not quite a sure bet as a franchise quarterback, if not that quarterback, then who?" The Dallases of the world faced that question. It wasn't that Dak Prescott had led them to multiple Super Bowls. He's a good quarterback, but because of the market, he got a great contract.
I never took an economics class in college. I stayed away from that. Oh, yeah. I went when I could. If I did have to take economics, it would have been the Rocks for Jocks version of economics. But I do understand the principle of supply and demand. That's exactly what that is, right? There's just not enough good quarterbacks to go around. So even the decent ones are going to, and Sam Darnold will be the next guy to benefit from that.
We're going to talk about Sam Darnold.
They're going to overpay for what he is.
But even decent quarterbacks are signing shorter term deals. They're signing 3 or 4 year deals. And what if they stay just good? For instance, I'm not Jared Goff. I'm thinking God, I can't remember the quarterback's name, but just say a quarterback in general. As long as he stays good and can win games, he doesn't have to be elite. Like you said, Willie, like, what's the alternative? If I move away from him, then who do I go get? So you're almost again, you're forced into signing these guys. And I love it, honestly. You're forced into signing these guys to these big contracts, when really they're not, based on their play and what you're wanting, they're not worth 40, 45 million. They may be worth 20, 25 million. But because of the supply and demand, they're going to be able to elicit more money because the shortage is there.
At the end of this story, it reads, quote, "No matter the potential pitfalls, the risk of paying a mega contract to a quarterback without elite credentials for most teams is less than the risk of trying to find a new one. Teams will probably keep taking those risks, spending ever greater sums on passers with no guarantee of an ultimate payoff." So when
I think it's going to be like that,
yeah,
for the foreseeable, it's just going to be the money you have to spend. I am curious how you do the end around on that and try to change the direction of it. I do think what the Bucks did with Baker Mayfield is worth studying. It may be a unique case, but the Bucks have gotten a ton of mileage and bang for their buck. Not a Super Bowl, but they have rebounded from the Tom Brady post era. I think when Tom Brady retired, you could look at the Bucks and say, oh boy, there's going to be some lean years coming up, because how do you replace Tom Brady? And they didn't have the next guy. But Baker Mayfield has turned them around and gotten to postseason the last couple years, played really solid, and he was a rebound guy that they got off the street for a cheap contract. Now they've signed him to a new contract, and he still isn't going to be in the range of Tua, Trevor Lawrence, and Jordan Love and those guys, right?
He signed a 1-year deal worth $4 million.
That's how they got him, right?
Joining the Buccaneers, and then parlayed that into a 3-year deal for $100 million in total and $50 million guaranteed.
But the only way they stop, they're not going to be able to stop it. The only way that they can sort of kind of corral this thing is if it's through, negotiations. That's the only way with the NFLPA. That's the only way they're going to, and the NFLPA ain't going to touch that. They're like, they're not getting you out of a jam that you've created yourself. So no, it's going to continue to stay the way it is. And if teams choose to say, you know what, I'm not doing that, I'd rather go for a mid-level guy and pay that mid-level guy, maybe half of what I would have had to pay, a really good quarterback or a quarterback that possibly can be a guy that wins us a championship. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pay half. Well, you might as well go back to the 80s in football when you didn't have to pay a Phil Simms, but you had a Lawrence Taylor, you had a Bavaro, you had all these great players on defense and some really good players on offense, and you weren't asking the quarterback to win you games. What were you asking the quarterbacks back then? Just don't lose the game. We're going to run, you're going to turn around, hand the ball off, play great defense, and quarterbacks don't lose the game. Every once in a while, you're going to find you a great one in Montana and some of these other guys. But for the most part, in the 80s and 90s, the quarterbacks, it was about running the football and playing great defense. So I'm sure, again, this is the creation of their own. So the NFLPA is not going to help them out. Now, if they want to take a stance on their own owners, they can. They can sort of try to, affect the market in some form or fashion, not paying all of the high paid guys, but paying the lower paid guys. But you got to understand, when you do that, you better build a team around that quarterback.
I also think the league as a whole, and maybe even the game, has not done a good job of developing quarterbacks.
Yeah,
because of the system they've set up. And so I think to create more supply, I think teams and leagues, the league should find better ways to develop the position.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on the quarterback landscape around the NFL. We'll get into what that could mean for the Titans as they search for their, hopefully, next franchise quarterback. We'll do that next. Willie Darnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game.
Okay, let's talk F&M Bank. Banking made easy on purpose. Remember, we take it to the bank with them every Friday at 1:45 and have a great time with it. In the meantime, F&M Bank wants you to know that they have 20 locations in our listening area. Their motto is banking made easy on purpose. They want to be right in the middle of your community. Your business means more to them. Start a relationship with them, whether you live in Springfield, Murfreesboro, Mount Juliet, West End Avenue in Nashville. They've got the whole area covered, 20 locations. And we had a caller from Hopkinsville, Kentucky earlier today. They've got a location up there as well. Just visit myfmbank.com, find the nearest location to you, and find out how they can make your banking life, your finance life easier. Doesn't that sound nice? They can do it for you. myfmbank.com. Member FDIC.
D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you talking about the value of quarterbacks and how it's exploding and what it could mean for the Titans. So, Derek, yesterday, I was driving around between the hours of 2 and 6, and when I listen to Stillman and Company, which is coming up right after our program on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. If Sam Darnold is better than Jalen Hurts, we know that Jared is keen on Sam Darnold. That's my PG way of saying it. The way I would like to say it is inappropriate for family radio. And Jared's point is that Sam Darnold is going to be, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase this. Sam Darnold, in his mind, can be the Titans version of Alex Smith when Alex Smith was traded from San Francisco to Kansas City in 2013, I believe it was, early in Mike Borgonzi's tenure with that organization. Now, of course, Mike Borgonzi, the GM of the Tennessee Titans. So I had Jared send me over the Pro Football Focus contract projections for free agents. And one thing that we know about this free agent quarterback class is Sam Darnold is the belle of the ball. And earlier in the show, I listed some of the other free agent quarterbacks who started multiple games this season. A group that includes Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, and Mason Rudolph. So there's a big drop-off between Darnold. Darnold does not have any competition in the free agent quarterback class.
Well, I will ask one question for context. Where would Sam Darnold have been on that list last year?
We would probably be as dismissive of Darnold as we have been of other quarterbacks. So I had Jared send me over Pro Football Focus's contract projections for the free agent quarterbacks. Now it only listed 3 in terms of the top players overall that are going to be available in free agency. So the 3 that he sent me were Sam Darnold, Justin Fields, and Russell Wilson. According to Pro Football Focus, Sam Darnold is projected to receive a 3-year contract with an average value of $41.25 million. So it's, as Willie said, it's supply and demand. Darnold had an overall good season. It did not end well. But as Kevin O'Connell said, the Vikings coach at the end of the season, he's hoping that people are looking at the overall body of work of Sam Darnold versus those 2 games, though it is kind of hard to ignore how he performed in those 2 games. It was pretty bad. But, someone is going to pay Sam Darnold a lot of money. And this just sort of goes into the conversation we're having about chasing a quarterback. There is a team out there. It could be the Titans that see Sam Darnold as their franchise quarterback. I believe Jared has made this point. He actually may have made it with Jalen Hurts. That in his mind, Jalen Hurts is not a franchise quarterback, but he's the Eagles franchise quarterback. There is going to be a team that's going to pay Sam Darnold. I wouldn't be shocked if Sam Darnold made $40+ million a year.
But what did we just get done saying about Jalen Hurts? They drafted him in the 2nd round. They brought him along slow. He earned his way by winning to earn the 2nd contract. Sam Darnold is on a faster track. You're trying to say that all of a sudden he's worth that money. And that's just too much of a reach for me. I will throw another one from the past that D-Mace will remember, being from Detroit. There was a guy named Scott Mitchell. Have you ever heard of Scott Mitchell, Adam?
Vaguely.
Derek has. You know why?
Yes, absolutely.
Scott Mitchell, right around the time that D-Mace was starring for the Spartans, right? There was a year that he was backing up Dan Marino in Miami. Dan Marino got hurt. Don Shula did a great Don Shula job. Scott Mitchell had a hot, half a season, 2/3 of a season, played really well and became a free agent. And who jumped on him? The Detroit Lions with Wayne Fontes. And they gave him big money, and he didn't do so well. They had some decent years, but it wasn't really what they were looking for. It was a brief run at best. There's a lot of other examples, more extreme examples, like a Matt Flynn or somebody like that.
Matt Flynn, I feel like, is the example that popped into my head.
Right. And but that was even less of a sample size than Scott
By
Mitchell.
the way,
and Darnold at least has a full season, so it's not a direct comparison.
Right.
But again, the desperate nature of paying a guy who really hasn't done a whole lot, overpaying for that when he hasn't had any success, that's too much of a reach.
In 2012, the Seahawks paid Matt Flynn on a 3-year deal, $26 million with $10 million guaranteed. Off of, I don't know how many games he played. It wasn't a lot.
It was maybe 3 or 4 games. Yeah.
Good for him. Cashing in.
Remember he threw the 5 touchdowns in the one game that really just sent everybody in a frenzy.
Right. But I'm curious about the Sam Darnold of it all. With the context of the conversation we had about the ballooning value of quarterbacks and the situation that Sam Darnold finds himself in. Now, there are other decisions that could be made that are quarterbacks who are not currently free agents who could become free agents, like Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers or Derek Carr. These are quarterbacks who are under contract, but it's possible that their teams might let them go. And they are added into this pool. Now, none of them are going to make the money that Sam Darnold is going to make, but it at least gives teams some more options. And maybe, Sam Darnold makes a little bit less. I don't know. But I'm just curious about Darnold in all of this because, as I said, some team is going to pay him that much money. We've talked about this last week because we talked about Jared's Alex Smith comparison, and we all agreed that we are skeptical of Sam Darnold as the next Titans quarterback. I still have those concerns about how it will translate from one place to another, but what do you think ultimately? I mean, how much if you had to guess right now, Derek, how much do you think Sam Darnold will make on an annual average value on his next contract?
I think he's going to get, north of $40 million. I would be surprised if somebody gets him to sign a contract, under 30, under 35. I would be surprised. But again, it's a supply and demand. There's not a high demand. I mean, there's not a high supply of quarterbacks coming out. So when there's not a high supply of quarterbacks, and we've talked about it, you might as well add a bump of probably 2%. 2 or 3% of what you were going to possibly, could make at its high end. Bump it up a couple of more percentages, and that's what you're going to get it. Why? Because the supply is very little. So you can't ask for that much. But to compare him to Jalen Hurts, I mean, listen, Jalen Hurts has been in the Super Bowl. Hell, it's been 2 Super Bowls now. He's proven that he's worth all of that and possibly a little bit more than what Philly gave him. And you got to remember, at the time Philly gave him, he was a top 4 guy in regards to the monies he was getting on average. He was in the top 4 or 5 when he got that money. Now, subsequently after that, other quarterbacks got money and it sort of lowered him a little bit. But I don't think, if you're talking about, signing Jalen Hurts and the money Jalen Hurts got, if both of these quarterbacks were sort of coming out, if both of these quarterbacks were signing contracts in the same year based upon the things that they've done, throughout the last 4 or 5 years, I think Jalen Hurts would get more money than Sam Darnold. Why? Because Jalen Hurts would have led his team to 2 Super Bowls. It's all about winning in the NFL. It's about winning. Can you get my team to the Super Bowl? Jalen Hurts, for whatever you say about him, you could say, well, he has, A.J. Brown and Saquon and Devontae Smith. I get it. And Goddard I get it. He has all these weapons, but he still does his part and he does it well. and he's led his team to two Super Bowls. So if both of these guys were free agents this year, there would be no way that someone would give Darnold more money than they would give Jalen Hurts, based upon what Hurts has done thus far and what Sam Darnold hasn't done thus far. So again, listen, he's going to get close. He's going to get possibly over 40 million. That's just how the market is. He's going to get that. Why? Because the supply for quarterbacks is very, very slim. But he tops the market when you talk about guys that are going to be free agents this year. And, sometimes it's not, who you are when you hit the market, is when you hit the market. Sometimes it's based upon that.
Joey from Bellevue on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, mentions a player I actually think is interesting in this conversation, a player that I haven't heard his name in ages, Brock Osweiler.
Another
quarterback. He signed a 4-year, $72 million deal with the did he go from the Broncos to the Texans?
Yes.
There was a stop in Cleveland somewhere along the line. That Osweiler was a guy that was filling in for an injured Peyton Manning with a really good Broncos team and did well in a short window. Parlayed that into
he went from the Broncos to the Texans on that contract.
Texans, and then I think the Browns tried to give him a shot.
But that was like league minimum at that point.
Right.
But he signed the huge deal. Yeah. He signed the huge deal with the Texans.
There you go. So that's another cautionary tale. Now, let's say this. Darnold has done more. You have a better picture of what Darnold is because he's played a lot longer and a lot more games. Albeit,
but I'm just talking about over the last 4 years. If both of these guys were free agents today, based upon the last 4 years, there's no way that you're going to look at both of them and say, "I'm taking Darnold over Jalen Hurts." You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know football because this guy has led his team to 2 Super Bowls. So why wouldn't you want him as your quarterback as opposed to Sam Darnold? That's what I'm saying. Again, it's about when you hit the market. If Jalen Hurts was hitting the market today, we would be talking about Jalen Hurts as the top guy rather than Sam Darnold, based upon his production and what he's done for his team over the last 4 years. Again, Philly has been to 2 Super Bowls in the last 3 years.
I have a couple of quarterbacks here that Ben Solak of ESPN.com, he did a story about Sam Darnold. I think we'll get into this a little bit more tomorrow. But he was looking at comparable situations, deals signed recently by veteran free agents given an opportunity to hold down a starting job, which is what happened with Sam Darnold, right? I'm not sure. I can't remember if the plan was to play J.J. McCarthy before he injured his knee, but Sam Darnold did get the opportunity in Minnesota, and he made the most of it. Here are the 2 quarterbacks that Solak mentioned in his story. In 2023, a 31-year-old Jimmy Garoppolo signed a 3-year, $72.75 million deal with the Raiders to be their bridge starter, with mid-round rookie Aiden O'Connell behind him, a yearly contract value of $24.25. He also mentions in 2019, a 26-year-old Teddy Bridgewater, and I know this vividly, he stepped in for an injured Drew Brees in New Orleans, played quite well, started 5 games, and parlayed that into a 3-year, $63 million deal with the Panthers. So based on their performances, I believe, in the season leading into those deals, Garoppolo in 2022 and Bridgewater in 2019, he looked at their numbers compared to Darnold's from this past season. They're roughly comparable. And Solak's his solution here, not solution, his what's the word I'm looking for here? His hypothesis is that he thinks $30 million for 3 years is a conservative estimate for Sam Darnold.
30 per year for 3 years?
It says $30 million for 3 years. So I have to make sure that's not $10 million per season, but that's 30. So he said with Darnold's free agent market in mind, he says a 3 to maybe 4 year deal worth $30 million to $40 million per year.
30 to 40. Yeah, I think he's going to be in that range because it just takes one that wants to jump out there and give him that will take the leap of faith. And I think that's overpaying.
It only takes, and you got to understand, listen, Sam Darnold, we're talking about these numbers, but he attempted the fifth most passes in the National Football League this year at 545 passes. Contrary to Jalen Hurts, who only threw, and he played one less game, but he only threw the ball 300 and sometimes. So it's all about what is the team asking you to do, and if we ask you to do a little bit more, will the numbers be a little bit better? Well, again, I go back to, if you're just comparing, because he brought up Jalen Hurts and Sam Darnold. Listen, I'm not saying Sam Darnold's not a good quarterback, and I'm not saying that. Hey, listen, if the Titans are going to get him, they need to make him. He needs to be their long-term fix, because he's young enough where if you sign him, you need to sign him to a 4 or 5 year deal. Um, you know, but what I'm saying is this: is that look at the numbers and look at what Jalen Hurts has done over the last 4 years. If he was asked to throw the ball 40 some times, maybe the numbers would be inflated a little bit more. But what I know he's done is win ball games. What I know he's done is taken the starting role of the Philadelphia Eagles 4 years ago and hadn't relinquished it. That I do know. What I know is he led his team to 2 Super Bowls and potentially can win this one. That's what I do know. So again, it goes back to, listen, Sam Darnold's not a bad quarterback. It's about when you hit the market and who else hits the market with you. Sam Darnold has hit the market at perfect time for his career. There's nobody else in the market that people would think would be a better option than Sam Darnold. So all the chips are in his pocket right about now.
615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts on this. Call us, text us. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game.
Duval.
Ugh, so bad, Liam Cohen.
I love it.
Liam Cohen coached Will Levis, correct?
Cringeworthy. Yep.
Duval.
I do get Will Levis vibes from Liam Cohen. So if they've worked together, so
Yeah.
it makes sense. Maybe
Would
they've
he
rubbed
like
off
to
on each
trade
other.
for Will Levis?
Yeah, maybe just so.
Huh?
You never know.
Jacksonville, do you need a quarterback?
Duval.
Now I'm not enjoying it as much as I did earlier. It's so bad. I implore you.
I love it. I love it.
If you are a fan of cringe comedy, look, like the Judd Apatow movies that came out when I was right in the wheelhouse. A lot of those came out when I was in college, like Superbad and The 40-Year-Old Virgin and Knocked Up and those movies. Like if you love
This
those
Is
movies,
40.
This Is 40.
This is a really good
I
one.
Love You, Man, which is an underrated one, I think, with Paul Rudd and Jason Segel. You know, I was a big fan of the show Freaks and Geeks when that was on television. So that's why I like Judd Apatow. But if you are a fan of cringe comedy, go watch Liam Cohen say Duval. As I said, the worst part of it is not even how he says it. It's the face he makes after he's done. He looks so proud of himself. Like, I nailed that. I practiced that all morning. I got it. But it's, oh God, it's bad. It's bad. Anyway, enough of that. A big matchup in the SEC tonight. Two teams that recently lost to Vanderbilt in college basketball. By the way, I think, Derek, you sent this to us yesterday, or maybe it might have been David. Who would have thought that Vanderbilt would have been ranked higher in men's basketball than UConn at any point ever? And it's happening right now. So congratulations to Vanderbilt. You are better than the two-time defending national champions. But Kentucky at Tennessee, number 12 at number 8 tonight on ESPN. It's another important game in the SEC. The thing I find fascinating about SEC basketball this season, Willie, and there was some talk early in the season about, can the SEC break the record for most teams invited to the men's tournament? I can't remember what the record is.
I believe the record
was it the Big
would
10?
be 12.
Was it the Big 10?
I think it was the Big East.
Or the Big East?
I think it was the Big East that had 11 in the past.
Would that have been like Syracuse and Georgetown, like at that time, Big East?
It wasn't that long ago. It's the Big East. I think it was definitely the pre-Big East, because the current Big East is only, 8 teams?
Yes.
Because they have the non-football schools that are equal. It's a really good league. Look it up. I know it's double digits, but I think 12 would be the record, and the projection.
The 2011 Big East had 11 teams in the tournament.
So,
and there was talk of the SEC getting 12 or 13.
Cardiac Kemba.
But yes, indeed. But the thing I'm fascinated by with SEC basketball is that these teams are sort of feeding on each other, right?
And we're not even halfway through the conference season. So I think the grind is going to be the key, D-Mace. Who can night in and night out withstand the punishment? Because you're probably going to take your lumps at some point. Like Tennessee's lost 2 out of 3. They've lost 3 in the league, but they're all really tough games on the road. And I think their schedule is coming back around. I think, relatively speaking, it's not easy, but I think it's a little easier than it has been. But here comes Kentucky. Here comes Florida. Those are the next 2 coming into your building. There will be pressure on Tennessee to rebound and hold serve there.
They have the SEC in basketball is becoming the SEC, like the SEC in football, where it's almost like they're cannibalizing themselves. Really good conference, but they're just eating amongst themselves. Right now, in the KenPom, which you love, Willie, and I just started, getting into, they have, I think, 12 teams within the top 50 from the SEC. And in KenPom, you can explain that to him, Willie, strength of schedule and all this other stuff, the college football, basketball,
adjusted offensive and defensive rankings and such.
Right. Absolutely. So they have that many teams in this is in the top 50. Now, as it continues to go, I think a lot of it's going to sort of play out as the tournament plays out, meaning the SEC tournament. And obviously,
that's going to be one hell of a tournament, by the way.
Yeah. So
in Nashville,
I can see getting 12 teams in. Whew, I mean, would they possibly deserve 12 teams?
Joe
based upon
Lunardi
the
right
conference?
now,
Yes.
Joe Lunardi, the main
Uh-huh.
bracketologist, has in his latest projection 13 teams from the SEC in the
Wow.
men's basketball tournament.
So
13.
he has Georgia.
It's
he has
a
Georgia in?
possibility. It's a possibility.
He's got. Let's see if I can do this quickly. He's got Auburn, Texas A&M. He has Missouri in. He's got Georgia in.
Okay, so Georgia would be the 13th, I think. Oklahoma would be a fringe team as well. Texas. So this is, look, we've got a long way to go. I don't want to see Joe yet. We're going to start seeing Joe pop up
In a month from now or so.
at least 2 or 3 times per broadcast, per game. So you're going to get very tired of Joe. But he does do a very good job. I will say that. I think it's interesting. It goes along with the trend in college sports where you have these super high number of teams in a league, in a powerful league like the SEC, 16 teams. So you just do the math. It's a higher percentage of the teams are going to get in. But 13 out of 16 would be, to me, where I think you got to draw the line. I think 12 is very possible. I think the Big Ten also, D-Mace, has got the same kind of thing going. They've got a ton of teams in there with UCLA and USC in there.
Well, where do
you draw the line there? How many does Lunardi have into the Big Ten?
It just feels so dirty to hear, in the Big Ten, UCLA and USC. I don't care for that.
That's the thing. Is like, now that you've sort of scaled back these conferences going from 5 to 4, now some of these perennial West Coast teams that were, killing it in the Pac-12 and getting some of those bids out of the Pac-12, now those same teams they more than likely will get bids, but now they're in the Big Ten as well as the SEC. So you're looking at it as the Big Ten and the SEC, just like in football, they're taking up the bulk of the slots when you're talking about tournament time. And I think they have earned that, but a lot of it's going to come down to how do they perform in their own tournament or leading up to their tournament. Say like a Vanderbilt, and we talked about this, Willie. They've had 2 big wins, but if they can't pick up one or two, like one more or 1 or 2 more big wins, or advance further than the first game in the SEC tournament, then they may be looking at Vanderbilt as a team that's on the outside looking in. Now, if they win one more big game and then they advance, past the first round in the SEC tournament, I believe that gives them more of an odds to make the SEC, to make the big tournament.
So Lunardi's breakdown by conference, he has 13 teams in the SEC. Are there 16 teams in the SEC? So 13 of 16. He has 9 from the Big Ten, 8 from the Big 12, and 5 from the ACC. How far the ACC has fallen, unfortunately.
Right. And remember, the head-to-head between the ACC and the SEC
was incredibly lopsided.
It was 14-2,
right?
I think, for the SEC. So
Duke
the
and
SEC
Clemson were the only teams that
has
won.
put in the groundwork to get some extra bids here. But there's still a lot of hoops to be played. One thing I'm curious about, remember, D-Mace, I just lost my mind a couple of years ago when Vanderbilt was being left out, and they weren't even in the first 4 out when it was all
it's
said
bad
and
when
done.
you're in the next 4 out. It's one thing when you're in the first 4 out. It's then when you're in the next 4 out.
Right.
That makes you feel even
But
worse.
I made the case that based on how the tournament has historically been selected, that despite the bad ranking that Vanderbilt had because they had lost to Grambling, among other things, and they had not blown out opponents, all the things that the net is kind of the new thing. I thought that by all of the other metrics and things that you judge a tournament team on with the big wins and things like that, I thought they had a better case than about 5 teams. But they were left out, and the only conclusion I could draw, because it wasn't close, was that the net was the only thing that they went by. So I'm curious. The net doesn't change as much. That was the thing that Vanderbilt fans were being driven crazy over, is they were getting these huge wins. They won at Rupp Arena. They beat Auburn. They were beating these big-time teams, and the net wasn't changing at all. So that's what you do have going for you if you're locked in that like 30-something net. I think Vanderbilt at last check is 37. We know the teams in the top of the SEC. That's not going to change much because you're not playing any bad teams. So as long as you play well, there's not a lot of fluctuation. So there's a good and a bad about the net, but by golly, you better be studying how you get a good net, because I do think they are leaning way more on that than they should, for better or worse.
So what you're saying is Vandy can't help themselves much, but they can definitely hurt themselves.
Yes, but if you can't help yourself much, then you also can't drop that much, even with some losses. I think, there's going to be a lot of teams in the SEC that end up somewhere between 10-8 or 8-10. I think the same is going to happen in the Big Ten, D-Mace. And so you're going to lose. There's going to be a lot of games where you come away with a tough loss. But as long as you get some wins and you're playing very good teams, I think my theory is anyway, your net isn't going to drop or even rise a ton in that, unless you rip off 7 or 8 straight wins or something like that.
Kentucky will be without Lamont Butler tonight, their super senior who started at San Diego State. Andrew Carr, who missed the game against Vanderbilt, is questionable. So Kentucky could be shorthanded in this matchup. Now, having watched Kentucky up close earlier this season when they played Duke in Atlanta, and I'm familiar with Andrew Carr, Willie, because he played at Wake Forest before he transferred to Kentucky. Like when he wasn't on the court for Kentucky against Vanderbilt, like that was a big loss for them. Like he is one of those key players that I wonder what that game would have been like had he been in there.
Sure. That brings up another thing. This came up 2 years ago. Vanderbilt, remember, their best player, Liam Cohen, had missed a lot of time with
Not
injuries.
Liam Cohen.
Not Liam Cohen. Who am I thinking?
Liam
Robbins. Robbins.
No. Look what you made David do. Yes, Liam Robbins.
I did not do that intentionally, Adam. I apologize. Liam Robbins, the big guy, who was, All-American when he's healthy, but he missed a ton of time. He kept getting hurt. But bringing up the Kentucky situation, this is another thing the committee has to try to navigate, is when key players miss key games, this is an age-old question, how do you factor that into a team's resume? I tend to think injuries occur for every team, and it's a benefit if your team stays healthy. It shouldn't be just a pass if you happen to be missing a guy here or there. I do think you have to take a look at it, but to me, I don't think it should be as big of a consideration as some people say.
6-1. I was about to say 615. The show is over. I mean, you can call at 615-737-1025.
But you'll be talking to Jared.
You'll be talking to Jared. If you want to get in on Jared's show right from the start, you can call at 615-737-1025. What I meant to say was that'll do it for us today. The phone line is still open, though. We will be live at Bridgestone Arena tomorrow. Predators and Canucks. Interesting game. Puck drop at 8, but we will be there starting at 11 o'clock on 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Be loving your people. Have a wonderful, safe, and blessed Tuesday. Peace.
Duval.